Hello everyone, my name is Jocelyn Ambrose and I'm 32 years old. To the world, I'm the founder and CEO of a successful tech company, but for most of my life I was just the footnote in my own family's story. I never expected that the moment I was most terrified of, facing my family's glittering, judgmental world, would become the source of my greatest vindication, a moment of revenge so sweet and so public it would change everything. It all came to a head at a press conference meant to save them, but it ended up liberating me. Before I dive into the story of how I turned my family's biggest social event into a rebellion they never saw coming, I want to connect with all of you out there. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by the people who were supposed to support you the most, please hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And for anyone new here, make sure you subscribe to join this incredible community of people who understand that sometimes, the family you choose is the one that truly matters. My story really begins in a world that was never meant for me, a world of silk and champagne, of air kisses and names whispered across crowded rooms. I grew up in the shadow of the Ambrose women, my mother, Beatrice, and my older sister, Cassandra. To the high society of our city they were royalty. Beatrice was the queen, a woman carved from ice and ambition, the chairperson of every important committee, her name synonymous with philanthropic glamour. Cassandra, or Cassie, was her perfect princess. She was beautiful, charming, and moved through their world with an effortless grace that I could only watch with a mix of envy and bewilderment. They were swans, elegant and serene on the surface, paddling furiously beneath. And I was the ugly duckling. Not in the fairy tale sense where I was destined to blossom. I was just awkward, clumsy, quiet. My nose was always in a book and later my fingers were always on a keyboard. I didn't have their smooth conversational charm or their innate understanding of social chess. I was a square peg in a round, crystal-cut hole. Our home, a sprawling colonial revival mansion with more rooms than I could ever find a use for, was less a home and more a stage. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every polished silver tray was a prop for the life my mother curated. It was a life of appearances and I, unfortunately, did not fit the aesthetic. From a very young age, the difference between Cassie and me was drawn in sharp, painful lines. I remember my 8th birthday. I had asked for a science kit, a real one with beakers and a microscope. I'd circled it in a catalog for weeks. My grandfather, my mother's father and the only person who ever seemed to see me, had winked and promised he'd see what he could do. But Granddad passed away 6 months before that birthday, and with him went the only advocate I ever had. On the morning of my party I came downstairs to find a mountain of presents, all wrapped in shimmering pink paper. Cassie, who was 10, was already directing the staff on where to place the balloons. My mother, looking immaculate in a cream-colored dress, kissed the air near my cheek. "Happy birthday, darling," she'd said, her eyes already scanning the room for imperfections. I unwrapped gift after gift. A dollhouse. A set of miniature porcelain teacups. A frilly dress that made my skin itch. There was no science kit. When I finally got to the last, largest box, my heart gave a hopeful leap. But inside was a vanity table, complete with a light-up mirror and a set of play makeup. Cassie clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, Mommy, it's just like yours. Josie, now you can practice being pretty." I felt a hot, prickly sensation behind my eyes. I looked at my mother, my lower lip trembling. But I wanted the science kit. Beatrice's smile tightened just a fraction. "Jocelyn, darling, little girls don't play with messy chemicals. They play with beautiful things. Don't be ungrateful." Later, during the party, Cassie held court with her friends, showing off her latest ballet positions. I was sitting in a corner trying to figure out how the battery-operated mirror on the vanity worked, when I overheard one of my mother's friends, a woman named Cynthia, say, "It's a shame about the younger one, isn't it? So plain. Nothing like Cassandra." My mother had let out a sigh that sounded like the air escaping a punctured tire. "I know. She's my little project. We'll get her there. It just takes more effort." I wasn't a daughter. I was a project. A fixer-upper. This pattern repeated itself throughout our childhood. When Cassie won her first junior beauty pageant, the house was filled with flowers for a week. The trophy was placed on the mantelpiece in the grand living room. When I won the district-wide science fair in 7th grade for building a rudimentary robotic arm, my mother had forgotten to even attend. She and Cassie were in Paris for Fashion Week. I called her from the school gymnasium, the blue ribbon clutched in my sweaty hand, the sound of cheering classmates echoing around me. "Mom, I won." I chirped, my voice filled with a pride I was desperate for her to share. "Oh, that's nice, darling," she'd replied, her voice distant and crackling over the international line. "Listen, I have to run. The Chanel show is about to start. We'll celebrate when we get back." They never mentioned it again. The ribbon ended up in a box under my bed, along with other small forgotten triumphs. My world was code, circuits, and the quiet hum of a computer processor. Theirs was galas, gowns, and the clinking of champagne glasses. They were speaking a language of social nuance and brand names, while I was learning C++ and Python. My father, a man who had long ago surrendered to the force of nature that was my mother, was a passive observer. He was a corporate lawyer who spent most of his time at the office or on the golf course. A quiet, peripheral figure who provided the funds for my mother's social empire but little in the way of paternal engagement. He loved me, I suppose, in his own distant way, but he never interfered with Beatrice's parenting. It was easier not to. The annual Starlight Gala for the Children's Foundation was the crown jewel of my mother's social calendar. It was her magnum opus, an event that took a full year to plan and was spoken of in reverent tones in the society pages. The foundation's official mission was to support disadvantaged children, but in reality, it was a vehicle for my mother and her friends to see and be seen. The money raised was staggering, but so were the expenses. Tens of thousands on floral arrangements flown in from Holland, a celebrity chef who demanded a six-figure fee, and of course the gowns. The unspoken rule was that every woman on the committee had to wear a new couture gown. The gala wasn't just about charity, it was about status. A competition of sequins and silk. For years I was deemed too awkward to attend. "You just wouldn't enjoy it, Jocelyn," my mother would say, not unkindly, but with a finality that brooked no argument. "It's all just people. And you're not a people person." Instead, I would watch from my bedroom window as the limousines pulled up, depositing glittering guests onto the red carpet that led into our home, as we often hosted the pre-gala cocktail hour. I'd watch my mother and Cassie, radiant and glowing, masters of their universe. It felt like watching a movie about a family I didn't belong to. The first time I was forced to attend, I was 17. My mother insisted it was time for my debut, as she called it. She'd hired a stylist who squeezed me into a pale lavender dress that felt like a costume. It was strapless and I spent the entire night hiking it up, convinced it was about to slide down to my waist. My hair, usually in a simple ponytail, had been tortured into a complicated updo that gave me a headache. "Just smile and stand next to your sister," my mother had instructed, her hands gripping my shoulders. "Let her do the talking." I did as I was told. I stood there, a silent, lavender-clad statue, while Cassie charmed everyone. People would glance at me, their eyes sliding over me without really seeing me, before turning their full, admiring attention to my sister. "And this is my younger daughter, Jocelyn," my mother would say, a hint of apology in her tone. At one point, a man my father knew, a portly banker named Mr. Harrison, looked me up and down. "So what do you do, little lady? Planning to follow in your mother's footsteps?" Before I could even open my mouth to say that I was captain of the coding club and had just been accepted into MIT's early admission program, Cassie laughed, a light, tinkling sound. "Oh, Josie's our little bookworm. She's the shy one." The conversation moved on, leaving me standing there, my one small piece of pride snuffed out. That night I cried myself to sleep, the ridiculous, expensive dress crumpled on the floor. I vowed I would never let them make me feel that small again. College was my escape. MIT was a 4-hour flight away, a different planet. For the first time I was in a place where being smart was cool, where my passion for technology wasn't an oddity but a currency. I found my people. My roommate, a brilliant, spiky-haired girl named Maya, taught me how to argue, how to stand up for my ideas. And then there was Marcus. I met him in a late-night study session for a brutal thermodynamics class. He was quiet like me but with a sharp, observant wit. He saw past the awkward shell to the person underneath. He didn't care that I didn't know the difference between Manolo Blahnik and Jimmy Choo. He was impressed that I could write an algorithm that could beat the stock market. He came from a working-class family in Ohio and he was at MIT on a full scholarship. He understood what it felt like to be an outsider. We became inseparable, a two-person team against the world. We spent our weekends not at parties but in the computer lab, fueled by cheap pizza and a shared dream. We wanted to build something. Something that mattered. My family rarely visited. The calls were perfunctory. My mother would talk for 20 minutes about committee politics and Cassie's latest social triumph, and then as an afterthought ask, "So, how are your little computer classes going?" She never once asked about my grades, my projects, or my life. It was as if she couldn't comprehend a world that didn't revolve around her own. When I graduated summa cum laude, they didn't come to the ceremony. There was a gala conflict. They sent a ridiculously large bouquet of flowers to my dorm with a card that read, "Congratulations. So proud. Love, Mom, Dad, and Cassie." Felt hollow, impersonal. Marcus, whose entire family had driven 13 hours to see him walk across the stage, gave me a hug that nearly cracked my ribs. "They're lost, Joe," he'd whispered. "They have no idea who you are." He was right. And I was starting to realize that was a good thing. It gave me freedom. After graduation, Marcus and I pooled our savings, took out a few terrifying loans, and started Nexus Innovations in a cramped garage in Palo Alto. The name was my idea. A nexus is a point of connection, and that's what I wanted to do. Connect people through technology in meaningful ways. Our first few years were a blur of ramen noodles, 100-hour work weeks, and the constant gnawing fear of failure. I didn't tell my family much about it. When I tried to explain our first software prototype to my mother over the phone, she'd listened for about 30 seconds before interrupting. "That's fascinating, darling, but have I told you who's agreed to be the honorary chair for the Starlight Gala this year? It's a real coup." I stopped trying. It was easier to let them think I had a little computer job out in California. Kept them at a distance. Kept me safe. Nexus Innovations started to grow. Our first major success was a secure, intuitive communication platform for nonprofits and educational institutions. It filled a niche that had been largely ignored by the big tech giants. We grew from 2 people in a garage to 10 employees in a small office, then 50 in a larger one. Within 5 years, we were a real player in the industry. We were getting press, winning awards. I was still Jocelyn, the quiet, awkward girl on the inside, but on the outside I was learning to be a CEO. I had to be. I had employees who depended on me, a company I believed in. Marcus was my rock, my CEO, the one who handled the things I wasn't good at. He was the extrovert, the negotiator. I was the vision, the architect. We were a perfect team. Still, my family remained blissfully, willfully ignorant. To them, I was still just Josie, the strange daughter who lived far away. They never read the articles in tech journals. They never saw the interviews. As far as they were concerned, my life was a distant, irrelevant side plot to their grand narrative. I sent them money for birthdays and holidays, substantial amounts that they accepted without much comment as if it were their due. I never went home. The thought of stepping back into that house, of being that 17-year-old girl in the lavender dress again, was paralyzing. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a board meeting, discussing a potential acquisition. My phone, which was usually on silent, buzzed with an incoming call from my mother. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. A sense of dread coiled in my stomach. Beatrice never called more than once. Something was wrong. I excused myself and stepped out of the conference room. "Mom? Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "Okay? Of course it's not okay. It's a catastrophe, Jocelyn. A complete and utter disaster." Her voice was high-pitched with panic, a sound I hadn't heard since Cassie had broken a priceless vase as a child. "What happened?" I asked, my mind racing through a list of potential tragedies. "Vanguardia," she wailed. "They pulled out. Vanguardia pulled their sponsorship for the gala." I blinked. Vanguardia was a luxury lifestyle brand, known for its $7,000 handbags and exclusive clientele. They had been the Starlight Gala's title sponsor for the last decade. Their withdrawal wasn't just a financial blow. It was a social one. It was a vote of no confidence. Why did they pull out? I asked, trying to sound sympathetic. Who knows? Some nonsense about a new marketing direction. They want to appeal to a younger, more authentic audience. As if there's anything more authentic than helping children. She sniffed, conveniently forgetting the $250,000 the gala spent on itself each year. "Beatrice, the whole committee is in a tailspin," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Cynthia is practically having a nervous breakdown. If we can't find a major sponsor in the next 2 weeks, we'll have to cancel. Can you imagine the humiliation? And a small dark part of me felt a flicker of something that resembled satisfaction. But it was quickly replaced by the old, familiar ache. She hadn't called to see how I was. She'd called to vent, to use me as a sounding board for her society problems. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Well, sorry doesn't help, does it?" she snapped. "We need a miracle." There was a pause, and for a wild second I thought she was going to ask me for help. That she might, for the first time, see me as a competent adult who might have resources. But then she said, "I don't suppose you know anyone, do you? In your little tech world? Some of those scruffy little companies have money, don't they?" Scruffy little companies. The words were a casual, thoughtless slap. I looked through the glass wall of the conference room at my team, at the company I had built from nothing, a company worth nearly $1 billion. "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "I don't know anyone." I ended the call and stood there for a long moment, my hand resting on the cool glass. Marcus came out and stood beside me, his expression concerned. "Everything all right?" I told him what had happened. He let out a low whistle. "Wow. So the Queen is in trouble." He looked at me, his eyes searching my face. "What are you going to do?" I shook my head. "Nothing. It's not my problem." But it was. It was my problem because no matter how successful I became, a part of me was still that little girl hoping for a science kit, still that teenager in the ill-fitting dress. A part of me still craved a single solitary crumb of their approval. The desire was a phantom limb, an ache for something that had been amputated long ago. For the next week I tried to put it out of my mind. I buried myself in work, but the thought of their desperation, their impending humiliation, kept bubbling to the surface. Cassie called me once, her voice frantic. "Josie, you have to help us. Dad said he can't just write a check for the full amount, it would look like a bailout. We're calling everyone we know. It's a nightmare. The caterer is threatening to pull out. The florist wants a deposit. My dress is custom-made. What am I supposed to do with a custom Galliano gown if there's no gala?" Her panic was entirely self-centered. Not a word about the charity, not a word about the children it was supposed to help. It was all about the dress, the party, the appearance. The final straw came a few days later. I was working late, trying to solve a particularly nasty bug in a new piece of code. I had my phone on my desk and it accidentally connected to the Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen of my apartment. I had called my father earlier to ask about a financial document, and he must have pocket-dialed me back without realizing it. Suddenly, the quiet of my apartment was filled with the voices of my family. They were in their living room, the sound clear and close. It was my mother and Cassie. I froze, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. I should have hung up. It felt wrong to listen. But I was paralyzed. "I still can't believe it," Cassie was saying, her voice thick with despair. "It's over. Everyone is going to be talking about this. We'll be a laughingstock." "We will not be a laughingstock," my mother's voice was steel. "I will not allow it. We just need to think. There must be someone. We've called everyone, Mother. No one is willing to step up on such short notice. Not for the amount we need." There was a sigh. Then my mother said something that shattered the last fragile piece of my heart. "It's times like these I wish Jocelyn had made a better match. Married someone with money. At least then she'd be useful for something. God knows she's no help otherwise. Tucked away in California with that ridiculous computer hobby of hers. She's probably living in some dreadful little apartment, bless her heart. She's an embarrassment, really. An embarrassment. A hobby. Useless." The words hit me with a physical force. I sank into my chair, the air leaving my lungs. I could hear Cassie murmur something in agreement. They had no idea. They had no idea that their useless daughter was sitting in a penthouse apartment that overlooked the San Francisco Bay. That her hobby was a company on the verge of going public. That their embarrassment was respected and admired by thousands of people. In that moment something inside me shifted. The ache for their approval, the phantom limb, it just vanished. It was replaced by a cold, clear and quiet fury. It wasn't the hot, explosive kind of anger. It was the kind that focuses the mind, that sharpens the senses. I disconnected the call. I sat in the darkness for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Marcus," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I have an idea. I think it's time we sponsored a charity gala. Marcus listened patiently as I laid out the plan. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he let out a slow, appreciative laugh. "Jocelyn Ambrose," he said. "You are a magnificent, terrifying genius. This is brutal. I love it." His validation was like a balm on a fresh wound. The plan was simple, and in its simplicity it was devastating. Nexus Innovations would sponsor the gala. We would more than match Vanguardia's contribution. We would save their precious event. But we would do it anonymously at first. Our legal team would handle the contract, stipulating that the identity of the new sponsor and its CEO would be kept confidential until a joint press conference, a detail my mother would adore for its dramatic flair. We would insist on a few minor clauses in the sponsorship agreement, buried in the legal jargon. Clauses giving the primary sponsor final say on budgetary allocations and the theme of the event. They would be so desperate they wouldn't read the fine print. They would just see the money and the salvation of their reputation. The next day, Marcus had our lawyers reach out to the Starlight Foundation's board. He instructed them to say they were representing a private, newly formed philanthropic arm of a major West Coast technology firm that wished to remain anonymous for now. The offer was a wire transfer of $2 million. It was more than double what Vanguardia had ever given. As I had predicted, my mother didn't question it. She didn't care who it was. The money was all that mattered. I got a breathless, triumphant call from her 2 days later. "Jocelyn, you will not believe it. It's a miracle. Some mysterious tech company from California swooped in to save us. They're giving us $2 million. Can you believe it? $2 million. We're saved. The gala is back on, bigger and better than ever." Her voice was giddy with relief. "They're very eccentric, of course. Insist on being anonymous until the press conference next week. But who cares? Their money is green. Cassie is already reordering the larger ice sculpture." I felt a strange sense of detachment as I listened to her. It was like I was watching a play and I already knew the ending. "That's wonderful, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "I'm happy for you. Happy for us. Darling, you should be happy for the children," she trilled, the irony completely lost on her. "Oh, and we're insisting you come, of course. You have to be here to see it. It's going to be the event of the season. You can even bring a friend if you want. Maybe that boy you work with? What's his name?" "Marvin." "It's Marcus," I said. "And yes, I think we'll both be there." The week leading up to the press conference was one of the longest of my life. I flew to New York with Marcus. We stayed at a hotel not at my family's home. I told them I didn't want to be a bother while they were so busy with the preparations. The truth was, I couldn't bear to be under their roof, to play the part of the awkward daughter for one more second. I bought a new suit for the press conference. Not a dress. A suit. A beautifully tailored, dark blue Armani power suit. It was armor. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see Josie the bookworm. I saw Jocelyn Ambrose, CEO. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my hotel room, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. What was I doing? Was this petty? Was it cruel? I thought about all the years of being invisible, of being a project, an afterthought. I thought about the words I'd overheard, useless, and embarrassment. This wasn't about cruelty. This was about truth. It was about showing them and maybe myself who I really was. It wasn't about tearing them down. It was about building something new, something better in the wreckage of the old. I was going to give their hollow, self-serving charity a purpose. That was the real revenge. The press conference was held in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. It was exactly the kind of opulent, over-the-top venue my mother would choose. The room was packed. Reporters from every major news outlet, society columnists, and a gaggle of my mother's committee members, all dressed to the nines and buzzing with excitement. Marcus and I slipped in through a side door and stood at the back of the room unnoticed. I saw my family at the front, near the podium. My mother was in her element, wearing a Chanel suit, her face a mask of serene triumph. Cassie was beside her, looking radiant in a red dress, smiling and waving at people she knew. My father stood slightly behind them, looking uncomfortable as always. They were a perfect, polished portrait of success, soaking in the glory of their comeback. They had no idea the tidal wave that was about to hit them. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My palms were slick with sweat. For a second I felt a familiar urge to run, to disappear. Then I felt Marcus's hand on my arm. "You got this, boss," he whispered. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders and nodded. My mother stepped up to the podium, a brilliant smile plastered on her face. The camera flashes intensified, a storm of light. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice smooth as cream. "Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, we recently faced a small challenge with our beloved Starlight Gala. But in times of adversity, true character is revealed. And the character of this city, the generosity of its people, never fails to inspire." She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes sweeping the room. "Today I am overjoyed to announce that the Starlight Gala is not only saved, but it will be more magnificent than ever before, thanks to the unprecedented generosity of a new and visionary partner." The room erupted in applause. My mother held up a hand for silence. This partner, a leader in the world of technology, initially wished to remain anonymous. But they have graciously agreed to be introduced today. They represent the future of philanthropy, a fusion of innovation and compassion. She looked down at her note cards and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She was about to say the company name. "Please join me in welcoming our new title sponsor, Nexus Innovations." There was a polite, slightly confused murmur in the room. Nexus Innovations wasn't a household name in this world of old money and luxury brands. I saw a few reporters start typing furiously into their phones. My mother forged ahead, her smile unwavering. "And now, it is my distinct honor to introduce the brilliant mind behind this incredible company, the person whose vision and generosity have made this all possible. Please welcome the CEO of Nexus Innovations." She looked expectantly towards the side of the stage. This was it. The stage manager, a young woman with a headset, looked at her list, then looked out into the crowd, her eyes finding me at the back of the room. She gave me a small, questioning nod. I nodded back. It was time. I started walking forward. Marcus gave my arm a final squeeze of encouragement. "Go get him, Joe." As I began to walk down the central aisle, a few heads turned. Then a few more. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. People were looking from me to my mother and back again. I kept my eyes fixed on the podium, my steps even and deliberate. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, but for the first time in my life I didn't shrink from them. I reached the front of the room. I could see my mother's face clearly now. Her smile had frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. The color was draining from her cheeks. Cassie was staring at me as if she'd seen a ghost, her perfectly painted mouth hanging open. My father just looked utterly, completely bewildered. I walked up the small set of stairs and onto the stage. I reached the podium and stood next to my mother. She was rigid, a statue of Chanel-clad shock. I could hear her whisper hissing at me through her clenched teeth. "Jocelyn, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Get off this stage right now." I ignored her. I turned to face the audience, the sea of reporters and flashing lights. I leaned into the microphone. "Good morning," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent, cavernous room. "I am Jocelyn Ambrose, founder and CEO of Nexus Innovations." A collective gasp went through the audience. The reporters went wild. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing the look of pure, unadulterated horror on my mother's and sister's faces. I saw Cynthia, my mother's friend, the one who had called me plain, actually clutch her pearls. It was a scene of beautiful, exquisite chaos. My mother tried to recover. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fabric of my suit. "There must be some mistake," she said into the microphone, her voice a strained, brittle thing. "My daughter. She has a wonderful sense of humor." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "There's no mistake, Mother," I said, my voice still calm, but with an edge of steel that no one in my family had ever heard before. I then turned my full attention back to the audience. Nexus Innovations was founded on a simple principle. I began, my prepared speech flowing easily now. That technology should be a tool for empowerment, for connection, and for creating real measurable change in the world. We believe in investing in potential. We believe in investing in the future. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I glanced at my mother. She looked like she was about to faint. Cassie was staring at me, her eyes filled with a confusing mix of anger and something else. Fear. "It is in that spirit," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "that we are so proud to partner with the Starlight Foundation. This organization has a long history in our city, and we are honored to help write its next chapter." I saw my mother relax slightly. Maybe she thought I would play along, that this was just some bizarre power play and that everything would go back to normal. He was wrong. And as my first official act as the primary sponsor of this foundation, and exercising the authority granted to us in our sponsorship agreement, I am thrilled to announce a bold new direction for the Starlight Gala and the Foundation's work. The room was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing, their fingers poised over their keyboards, waiting. For years, this gala has been a symbol of glamour and society. But glamour is fleeting. True impact is not. That is why, effective immediately, the mission of the Starlight Foundation is being refocused. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. From this day forward, 100% of the funds raised by this foundation will go directly to the establishment of the Starlight STEM Scholars Program. The words echoed in the silent room. I saw looks of confusion on the faces of the committee members. This program will provide full 4-year university scholarships and mentorship opportunities for underprivileged and marginalized girls from this city who wish to pursue a degree in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. I let that sink in. Then I delivered the final fatal blow. We believe in funding futures, not parties. Therefore, there will be no more funding for designer gowns. No more funding for imported champagne. No more 6-figure fees for celebrity chefs or $50,000 ice sculptures. I looked directly at my sister when I said that last part. Her face, which had been pale, was now flushed with a furious mottled red. The Starlight Gala will still exist, I concluded, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. But it will be a celebration of our scholars. It will be a showcase of their achievements, their dreams, and their incredible potential. It will be a testament to the fact that the most valuable thing we can invest in is a young person's mind. Thank you. For a moment there was absolute stunned silence. It was as if I had sucked all the air out of the room. Then chaos erupted. The reporters were on their feet, all shouting questions at once. "Miss Ambrose, does this mean you're taking over the foundation? Mrs. Ambrose, were you aware of your daughter's plans? Cassandra, what are your thoughts on the new direction?" My mother stood there, paralyzed, her face a mask of incandescent rage. She looked at me, her eyes promising a kind of retribution I had never imagined. Cassie burst into tears, a dramatic, gulping sob, and fled the stage. My father, bless his heart, just looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Amid the pandemonium, one reporter from a major national paper managed to shout a question that cut through the noise. "Miss Ambrose, what was your motivation for such a radical change?" I looked out at the frantic, hungry faces of the press. And for the first time I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Let's just say," I said, my voice carrying over the din, "that I'm a big believer in funding the awkward girls. The plain ones. The ones with the hobbies. Because sometimes they're the ones who change the world." And with that I turned, gave my shell-shocked mother one last level look, and walked off the stage, leaving her to face the storm I had created. The moment I stepped off the stage, Marcus was there. He threw his arms around me in a fierce hug. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen," he said, his voice filled with awe and laughter. "You didn't just drop a bomb, you detonated a nuclear warhead." The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, a dizzying, exhilarating rush. I felt light, free, as if I had just shed a skin I'd been trapped in for 32 years. The chaos in the ballroom was a distant roar. We were heading for the side exit when a hand clamped down on my arm hard. I turned to see my mother, her face contorted with a fury that was terrifying to behold. "You," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You will come with me. Now." She practically dragged me into a small, private lounge off the main hall, my father and a still sobbing Cassie trailing behind her like wreckage in her wake. The door slammed shut, cutting off the noise of the press conference and trapping the four of us in a suffocating silence. Beatrice rounded on me, her eyes blazing. "How could you?" she spat. "How dare you humiliate me like that? In front of everyone. My friends, the press, the entire city. You have destroyed everything I have built." "I haven't destroyed anything," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The fear I had always felt in her presence was gone. "I've improved it. I've given it a purpose beyond your own vanity." "My vanity?" she shrieked, taking a step closer. The Starlight Foundation has been the most respected charitable institution in this city for 20 years. We have done good work. You've thrown expensive parties, I countered, my voice level. You've raised money, yes, but you've spent a fortune on yourselves to do it. You call it charity, but it's always been about you. About your status, your friends, your dresses. Cassie finally found her voice, lifting her tear-streaked face. You did this to hurt me, she wailed, pointing an accusatory finger. You knew how much the gala meant to me. You mentioned my dress. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me. The accusation was so familiar, so childish that it almost made me laugh. Jealous? I asked, a sad shake of my head. Oh, Cassie. Oh. I'm not jealous. I used to be when we were kids. I used to wish I could be beautiful and charming and loved like you. But I'm not that person anymore. I looked from her to my mother and I let the years of hurt finally spill out. You want to know why I did this? I did this because of every birthday you forgot, every achievement you ignored. I did this because of every time you called me your project, or your awkward daughter. I did it because just last week I heard you, Mom, call me a useless embarrassment. You thought I was living in a dreadful little apartment, with a ridiculous hobby. You have never, not once in my entire adult life, taken a genuine interest in who I am. You don't know me. You don't see me. You just see a disappointment. My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Jocelyn, that's not fair, he mumbled, looking at the floor. Your mother and sister. They love you. Love me. I let out a short, sharp laugh. They don't even like me. Do you have any idea what my company does, Dad? Do you know what my hobby has become? He had the grace to look ashamed. He shook his head. No. I don't. Of course you don't, I said, my voice softening with a wave of pity for this man who had chosen to be a ghost in his own family. Because you never asked. My mother, seeing she was losing control, tried a different tactic. Her face crumpled and she began to cry. Not the dramatic sobs of my sister, but quiet, wounded tears. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice breaking. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, the best schools. I did my best. I just wanted you to be happy. It was the classic manipulator's defense, the last resort of the narcissist. But it didn't work on me anymore. You wanted me to be a version of you, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You wanted me to fit into your world. But I couldn't. And instead of trying to understand my world, you just dismissed it. You dismissed me. I took a deep breath. The sponsorship stands. The new mission stands. You can either get on board and help me make this something genuinely impactful, or you can step aside. But the days of the Starlight Gala being your personal social club are over. I turned to leave. My mother called out my name, her voice desperate. Jocelyn, wait. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. What will people say? She whispered, and in that one question, I heard the truth of her entire existence. It was never about me or the charity or even her own feelings. It was about her image. What will people say? I imagine, I said without looking back, they'll say it's about time. And then I walked out the door, leaving the ruins of my old family behind me. Marcus was waiting in the hallway. He just nodded and we walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight, leaving the plaza and its gilded cage far behind. The air had never tasted so sweet. That evening my phone blew up. Not with angry texts from my family, but with emails and messages from friends, old classmates, and complete strangers who had seen the press conference online. The story had gone viral. Jocelyn Ambrose, tech CEO, reimagines society charity, was the headline on a major tech blog. Another, in a national newspaper, read, Philanthropy's New Face. Ambrose heiress ditches gowns for STEM. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. People were inspired. They were excited. I had tapped into a sentiment I hadn't even known was so widespread. A weariness with performative charity and a hunger for authentic change. A producer from Good Morning America called to book me for an interview. It was dizzying. I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible, and now I was suddenly powerfully visible. A week after the press conference, the first Starlight STEM Scholars event was held. It wasn't a gala. We called it a showcase. We held it at the city's Science Museum, a place I had loved as a child. There were no ice sculptures or floral arrangements flown in from Europe. The budget for the entire event was less than what my mother used to spend on canapés. The food was simple, catered by a local woman-owned business. The decorations were posters and projects created by high school girls from across the city, showcasing their science and tech ideas. The guests of honor were not socialites or celebrities, but 100 bright, nervous, and incredibly inspiring teenage girls who were finalists for the first round of scholarships. My mother and sister did not attend. My father sent a brief, stilted email saying they needed time. I understood. Their world had been turned upside down, and they didn't know how to exist in this new one I was creating. The showcase was one of the best nights of my life. I walked around talking to the girls, listening to them explain their projects with a passion and intelligence that took my breath away. There was a girl who had designed a low-cost water filtration system for developing countries. Another had coded an app to help neurodivergent students with time management. A third had built a small robot out of spare parts to help her disabled grandmother. These girls were brilliant. They were the future. And for too long they had been overlooked just as I had been. Standing on the stage that night, looking out at their eager faces, I announced the first 10 scholarship recipients. As I called their names, their reactions were a beautiful symphony of gasps, tears, and ecstatic cheers. One girl, a shy young woman named Maria who wanted to be an aerospace engineer, just stood there, covering her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Her mother, a woman who worked 2 jobs as a cleaner, was hugging her so tightly I thought she might break her. In that moment I knew I had done the right thing. This was real. This mattered. This was worth so much more than 1,000 couture gowns. After the showcase I returned to California, but I was committed to overseeing the foundation from a distance. The old committee, my mother's friends, had all resigned in a huff. I replaced them with a new board, composed of educators, scientists, and community leaders. The foundation was reborn. About 6 months later I was back in New York for a board meeting. I was having coffee in a small cafe near my hotel when my phone buzzed. It was Cassie. My finger hovered over the ignore button, but something made me answer. "Hello, Cassie," I said, my voice cautious. "Jocelyn," she said. Her voice was different. Quieter. Subdued. I saw the pictures from the showcase online. It looked nice. "It was," I said simply. There was a long, awkward pause. Then she said, "That girl, Maria. The one who got the first scholarship. I read an article about her. Her father was a mechanic. He died last year. She and her mom were about to lose their apartment." "I know," I said. "She's an incredible young woman. She's starting at Cornell in the fall." "Wow," Cassie said, and for the first time, I heard a note of genuine awe in her voice. "Cornell." Another pause. "Mom is still not happy," she said. "She's telling everyone you've destroyed her legacy." "And what do you tell them?" I asked, genuinely curious. She was quiet for a moment. "I tell them you're building a new one," she said so softly I almost missed it. "A better one." I was stunned into silence. "Listen," she continued, rushing the words out as if she was afraid she'd lose her nerve. "I know I was awful. For a long time. I guess I was just so busy trying to be what Mom wanted me to be, I never thought about what I wanted. Or who you were. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was a start. It was a crack in the icy facade." "I have to go," she said abruptly. "But maybe next time you're in town we could, I don't know, get coffee." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. My relationship with my mother remains complicated. She has not been able to bring herself to apologize, and perhaps she never will. She keeps her distance, communicating mostly through my father. But she hasn't actively tried to sabotage the new foundation. In her world, public opinion is everything, and the public opinion of the Starlight STEM Scholars Program is overwhelmingly positive. To fight it would be to further tarnish her own image. So she tolerates it, a silent, disapproving ghost on the periphery of my new life. My father has started to make an effort. He calls me and he asks questions. Real questions. About my work, about the scholars, about my life. He's trying, in his own fumbling way, to build a bridge across the chasm that has separated us for so long. It's a slow, awkward process, but it's progress. Last month we held the second annual Starlight Showcase. This time Cassie was there. She didn't come in a designer gown. She wore a simple black dress and stood at the back just as I used to do. She watched, she listened, and at the end of the night she came up to me and introduced me to a young girl she had been talking to, a budding marine biologist. Cassie was sponsoring the girls' application fee for a summer science program. It was a small gesture, but it was a seed. A seed of change, of hope. I no longer live my life for my family's approval. My worth is not determined by their opinion of me. It's forged in the code I write, the company I've built, and the futures I am now helping to fund. The awkward girl is gone. The project is complete. Not because I learned to fit into their world, but because I finally had the courage to build my own. And in this world, every girl with a passion for science, every girl who feels like an outsider has a place to shine. Looking back on it all, the journey from being the Ambrose family's invisible daughter to the woman I am today feels both incredibly long and blindingly fast. The lesson I carry with me, the one that's been forged in fire, is that your value is inherent. It's not something that can be given to you or taken away by anyone else, not even your own family. For years I was waiting for them to see me, to validate my existence, when the truth was, I needed to see and validate myself first. The sweetest victory wasn't the public humiliation of my mother and sister at that press conference. It was the quiet, profound peace that came afterward, knowing I had used my power not for petty revenge, but to create opportunities for others who were just like me. My story is about family, but it's also about finding your own definition of success and legacy. So I want to ask all of you, what does that mean to you? Share your own story in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated or had to fight to prove your worth? I read as many of your comments as I can, and your stories give me so much strength. If my journey resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges and finding your own power. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, who might be feeling invisible in their own life, please share this video with them. Thank you so much for joining me and for listening to my story. Remember that family is defined by love and respect, not just by blood. I wish you all the strength to build a life that is authentically, unapologetically yours.